Hey, it's Clint. Today, what I wanted to do was to guide you through the process of what I'm doing when I'm developing n8n apps. And this is something that is new for me, but the reason I'm doing it and the reason I want to document it and share it with everyone is there is a bit of a disconnect in the creation of n8n apps and the understanding that we have of no code. And while, yes, we can build apps that are extremely functional and can be used with no code, can be built with no code, whether we're using Mac.com, n8n, whatever you want to use, Zapier, App, Vappy for voice tools, relevance. Without plan, and I was saying this the other day to someone, it is like you are building a coffee table and you end up building it with the legs facing up instead of facing down. And it's the same thing. I remember as when I was a kid, want to go and build something, build a project. Without a plan, it just doesn't come together. So this is what we need to apply the same reasoning, the same methodology to building apps. Now, I'm not a developer in the traditional sense of the word, but I have been using n8n to build apps that help me in my digital forensics and cyber incident response capabilities. So let's do one together. So I'm in ChatGPT, and the end game here is that we will have a workflow that will go straight into n8n, and I want to guide you through this whole process. So let's have a look. So what we want to do, we want to get this plan. What I understand is that a plan for software is called a PRD. You have to work with me here because the way that I've just written this is not ideal. We want to give it some context. You know what? Let's move this around. Act as a senior engineer, software development. Oops. Senior software development engineer. Okay. Define a PRD for an n8n application. We really want to pad this out. We really want to give it some context, give it an idea, get it to ask us more questions, ask me more questions in case it is unsure. The reason we do that is the more assumptions it is making, the more likelihood that we have for errors. And just going back and telling it, no, that's wrong, you're stupid, it's not helpful. It just keeps producing more and more crap. So we're setting up the prompt here. Act as a senior software development engineer. Define a PRD for an n8n application. You should ask me questions if it is not immediately clear. Do not assume. Ask me for clarification before proceeding. Okay, that's good. But what about in the middle? What kind of application do we want to create? What kind of PRD are we developing? We want to relate it to something for cybersecurity. The application is an OSINT, because this is a project that I'm working on at the moment. The application is an OSINT tool that leverages the hacker target trying to think what else their API supports. I have to look at them. Now, what I know is that from looking at their API specification previously, that they have a very specific criteria that they want to use. So let's grab that. I'm just going to pause this for a sec. Okay, we are on the Hacker Target website. I have navigated through. I've logged in, have managed not to reveal my API key, and that means that they won't have to reset it like they had to do for me last time because I uploaded it to YouTube, which was good. Okay, so these are the tools that we have. This is what is available to us with the API. what they consider IP tools. Traceroute, test ping, DNS lookup, find A records, lots of stuff. Really good base OSINT, OSINT, open source intelligence. Let's just keep it easy. Open source intelligence tools. This is what we want to use. This is what I want to do programmatically to make my job easier in the SOC, in the Security Operations Center. So what have we got? Okay. Use it. Okay, so they make it really easy, and this is amazing. If you can get an API that has a curl string pre-made for you, it just makes it really easy because you can import that directly into n8n, and we'll get to that. So api.hackertarget.com, DNS lookup / $Q. So when we've got that $Q, that means query. Then we can put the domain in that we are seeking to query. I will put in my blog. Then we feed it our API key. This is the demo key that they provide. I'm going to do my best to hide mine when it comes time to do it. There's another way that we can do it. Okay, so there's just two different ways. Interesting. Why would you? I guess that just depends on your usage of curl, however you'd like to do it. I think, look, this is just a real simple way. So we'll give it, let's put it to the test. These are all of the options that we have to utilize the API. This needs to go into the spec, the PRD, the specification document. Further information is located in their API. And this is something that I've had challenges with recently. Normally what I'm doing is I've been using Claude to generate the code, a copy and paste from Claude straight into n8n, and it creates me a workflow. 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, it just works. But you can tell it's obviously created by AI. It may not follow a logical flow, and it just doesn't work together. And in particular, parsing things like this, which is what I was trying to do yesterday, doesn't really flow. The main thing, the main challenge that I had is I want to use JSON so that I can supply the API once, or supply my API key once as a variable in the early stages of the workflow. Ideally, I would like to parse it as a generic credential in n8n. And what happens, this is the export from Claude. This is based on me saying, go and generate me an OSINT tool. I want to do the following things. Here's the spec. Here's the API that we can utilize through Hacker Target. And it just went and spat this out. And yeah, it's good. Let's move me. It's good in theory. It has what we want. DNS, who is, reverse IP lookup, reverse DNS. Yeah, good stuff. The difference is, and this is where it fell over, probably because I didn't do a PRD, which is why we're here today. It thinks we're going to start with a webhook, configure parameters, spit this all out. What we want to do is we want to have a form that we can easily use in n8n, because this isn't client facing. This is for me. I just want to be able to drop it into the form and then run my workflow and off we go. So if we go back to ChatGPT, these are the things we want to do. So let's just review. Act as a senior software development engineer, define a PRD for an n8n application. The application is an OSINT tool that leverages the Hacker Target API. I know I pronounce OSINT that way. It's probably wrong. Old habits die. Okay. It does things like IP lookups, etc. Further information is located in the API spec. The specification is as follows. Cool. We're providing that extra context. Now, what I really want to do, there's a bit of a trick to writing good prompts, and part of it is the way that ChatGPT interprets the prompt, and it provides higher priority for certain things, especially at the start and the middle, and I think towards the end it slows things down. And slows things down is probably not the right way to say it. Assigns it less priority. So key points. I want to supply an API key as a variable at the start of the workflow. I also want to make sure that I also want, and my prompt engineering is way off. This is something that I'm learning and getting better as time goes on, but I still have a long way to go. I also want to supply the domain to look up this. And as I'm writing this, I'm thinking that this needs to go in at the start. This shouldn't be an afterthought. This should be in the key specs that need to go right up front. I also want to supply the domain to look up as a variable supplied into then form. Because with the webhook, if it's expecting a webhook, that means that I'm going to be hosting a form on my website, and then the form submits to the webhook, which is just, once the workflow is active in n8n, is just waiting, sitting by the phone, waiting for me to send it data. I don't want to work like that. That creates a whole lot of extra work that I don't want to do right now. It's not part of my use case. Cool. Key points. Let's just see how this goes. Now, what I'm fully expecting is that it will generate my PID. We'll take it from ChatGPT. Then we will give it to Claude. The reason I'm doing it in ChatGPT initially is because I've got a ChatGPT Pro subscription, or whatever the base subscription is, not the $200 one. And that means that I have access to more tokens. My conversation length is longer. Claude is, I'm on the free plan, and that means that the conversation length is limited, and I can only have a certain amount of conversations per day before it says, all right, you've hit your limit. You need to go away and either start a new conversation or come back later. So by doing it this way, we can leverage what I'm paying for, hopefully refine it, get what we need, and then take, here we go, we've got some questions, and then we go into Claude once we've got the final revision, and then go, this is the PID, go and build me my workflow. Hopefully we can then paste it in, and then we're good to go. But we're working together, we're learning together as we go. So let's see what happens. It's got a whole bunch of questions. Do you want the domain IP input to be provided by a native n8n UI form or an external webhook form? Good. So it's asking us these questions rather than just assuming. It is asking, what type of output do you want? All right, so this is going to be good. The way that I normally respond to these is a little bit different. What I want to do, convert all these bullets, because I want to make sure that this is nice and orderly and I can respond and we track everything. I probably wasn't specific enough, but okay, that's fine. I'm just going to go a native UI form. I just want to keep it simple. I don't want to overcomplicate it, and I don't want to include something in a workflow like adding a webhook as well because, oh, that'd be nice to have. And then what it does is it creates like a contingency and maybe two separate paths, and it might just confuse things. I want to keep it real simple, get my MVP running. Once we get that working, then we can move on and try something better. So we'll go 1A, B, might just working this out and format this. Okay. And n8n. Oh, that's nice. Oh, okay. I've totally misinterpreted how this is going. Do you want it to be it's question 1, and the question is, do you want it to be A, B, or C? And I'm just going to respond A. I've completely misinterpreted that. Good. 2. It's smarter than I thought. I was taking shots at it, and it's probably laughing at me. Okay, what kind of output do you want for each query? Raw API, structured, parsed JSON, saved to a Google Sheet database, or just return in execution? This is the importance of developing a PID. I didn't even think about this. I was just thinking, oh, so we'll just get the output and it'll just show me in raw JSON, in n8n, and yeah, whatever, I'll have the data and who cares. Really cool. If I was doing something maybe for incident response, I would definitely want to keep this in a Google Sheet or maybe like an Airtable. So really what I think I'd like to do, I mean, for now, I'd be happy with just structured JSON. That means I can parse it to other stuff later. That just helps me out. Should users be able to select specific tools, e.g. DNS lookup only, or should all tools run by default? Again, let's keep it simple. My only concern is the port scan. I don't really want to do that every time. I have a feeling that when n8n is executing workflows, it is executing from my IP address. It's something that I need to test, but I've been using, I think this is the case for a lot of these types of systems, maybe not Apify, but yeah, I've just been getting a lot of prompts from when I'm browsing websites or even getting blocked from WordFence. They think I'm a bot and asking me to do a lot of captures. Yeah, I've looked my IP address up in Abuse IP DB, haven't seen any problems, but I'm not entirely sure if my theory is correct or not. Okay, 4. How should the API key be stored and passed? Stored in an n8n credential node, supplied as a workflow variable at runtime. Really, to be more secure, we want to store it in an n8n credential node. And I've been trying to work on that one. Okay, I think it's going to be a generic credential, but we'll wait and see. 5, do you want to include rate limiting? Yes, we do. Funny story, when I first started using Hacker Target, I'm so glad I asked this, I forgot about it. When I first started using it to do some lookups, it would error out straight away. And I emailed the Hacker Target guys. Fortunately, they're in Australia. They're down in Canberra. And they got back to me within a couple of minutes. And I just said, hey, new to Hacker Target. I'm trying to build something in n8n. It looks like I'm getting an error. It's saying rate limited. I'm sorry. I'm not sure what's going on. I'm not trying to abuse the system. I'm not trying to be malicious or bite off more than I can chew. Can you give me a hand? And they said, yeah, no worries. What you're doing is sending 20 requests a second. And yeah, try sending 2 per second and you'll be fine. So yes, we definitely need to do this. And that, the way that I fixed that was I just put it was an option. And this is something that I thought the developers of n8n could help us out a little bit more. I would like to see, instead of having to click on option and then it displays additional options for you, I would like to see them all on one page so that we can identify problems and as just by casually seeing, rate limiter, that might be a good idea. Segue aside, let's just go, yes, we need a delay. Maximum of 2 per second. I believe that is the case. And the way that n8n calculates this is strange. I think you have to do it in milliseconds. So anyway, you combine amount of requests per milliseconds. So you have to do 1,000 milliseconds for 1 second. Okay, should this workflow run on demand, on a recurring schedule, both? On demand. Yeah. And so sometimes I use just a response. Sometimes I just put the letter in. Sometimes I will provide a string, sometimes a letter, and then sometimes I'll provide a bit more context. I just want to get going. I'm just talking too much. What is the intended deployment context? Personal use, internal company tooling, customer-facing product. Oh, look, does it really matter? Personal use. All right, ready when you are. There is no number 8. What a shame. Here we go. Now we should have a PID. Oh, it's so exciting. Okay, yeah, executive summary. Wow, I feel like I'm reading a forensic report. Excluding port scan, return structure. Okay, so let's listen to what we've said. User stories. Okay, excellent. I've heard about user stories, especially with testing. As a user, I want to do this. This. Functional requirements. Oh, this is amazing. API key. We have variable set. Oh, if this works, very exciting time. Okay. Key store. Hard coding of secrets. Marvelous. Internal access only. Give me the JSON. Okay, so it's been a few more days since the initial recording was done. And unfortunately, what happened was the 45-minute recording that it ended up being was cut short. And what happened was the last bit of the video where I was opening up n8n was where the last of the content existed. So this is a new video. This is about a week later, which I know is really strange conceptually to think of the last video and now it's a week in the future. But this is where we're at. And the difference is the PRD that we had built is a little bit different. So the PRD that we had built for Hacker Target n8n tool initially is different to what we've got now. And the reason for that is, as I'd said, what we saw in ChatGPT was not entirely going to work, and this was the case. So I did give it a shot. I did download the JSON, did try and import it into n8n, didn't work. Then I put our PRD that we created into Claude and just did it like this. Just did a copy and paste. You can also upload it if you download it as a document or as a markup file. This has given us the workflow, just scrolling through as it is explaining what it has created. The idea, and what I was really trying to get to, is to move away from having to put the API key for Hacker Target into every single node. I'm trying to do that to save time so that it can just be simpler to create, and also from a maintenance perspective, so that going forward, as we add additional nodes, it's quite easy. We can just select from the credential list of a generic API authentication, but that didn't work. And I ended up going onto the Hacker Target website, going back through their API reference, and there's two methods of API usage that we have. One is putting it in the URL, which is what I had done in the past and had found it worked out really well. But that's actually less secure. And the reason it's less secure is that it will show up in a lot more logs than the alternative method, which I'll get to in a second. So if you're using this in your company or at home, if in general you're much more privacy conscious, what happens is any device, and this even occurs from using free Wi-Fi, so you're at McDonald's or the airport. Just to go into a little bit of a network security segue, anyone who is monitoring the connection, if you are using a URL-based authentication mechanism, what I was doing by having the API key in the actual URL itself, this is going to show up in things like DNS logs. It will show up in proxy logs. It is just part of how the internet works and how networks are built, that you would want to monitor these things, looking for evidence of potential outbound access to malicious domains or URLs. This, unfortunately, just these API keys would just get caught up in the crossfire. What I've switched to is using header auth. So header auth means when an HTTP request is sent, which is when you browse a website, you're accessing it over the HTTP protocol, or HTTPS in 99% of cases these days, because it has SSL. And what that means is that if anyone is just monitoring the traffic, say someone has installed a network tap between your computer and the internet gateway or your internet modem, right? They can intercept that. But with HTTPS, all they see is just a bunch of content that is encrypted and looks like random characters, random letters, random numbers. So coming back to this, when we are working with HTTP or HTTPS, every time that you visit a website, an HTTP header is created, and it's part of this long method of accessing a website. And in the header, it contains information that tells the server what you're requesting to access, and it also allows your computer to receive it in a way that it makes sense. So the protocol is just a set of agreed upon rules to allow two computers to communicate. And in this instance, it's your computer communicating with the web server. In the header, we can, I shouldn't say inject, but we can place values that can be understood by the web server. And in this case, the API is accessed by using a header. So when you access an API, it's still accessing it over a web server. The API is just another layer on top. And the API is the bouncer at the nightclub. When you walk up, the bouncer says, "Are you on the list?" This is the analogy for, do you have an API key? So the nightclub is the web server. The bouncer is the authentication mechanism. And the door list, to say that you are allowed to come in and don't have to pay the cover charge or whatever, is the API key. The analogy there is you're at the back of the line yelling out to the bouncer, "Hey, my name's Clint Marsden. I'm on the list." Everyone can hear you. That's the same if someone was monitoring your network traffic. Say if you're at as the example of you're at McDonald's or you're at the airport using the free Wi-Fi. If someone has a backpack nearby with a fake access point, wireless access point, and they are pretending to be, they are spoofing the access point name of the airport, spoofing the access point name of McDonald's, and a whole bunch of other stuff that is being faked, they can intercept that traffic. And that's the other way of doing it. So by using the header auth, this gets built into the header and is a more secure way of accessing it. So you would need to be doing packet capture to obtain this data. This is not available by just looking at the log files in DNS or the proxy log. And by default, most of those systems do not do packet captures because it takes up a lot of extra space. Okay, now you've got like a whole history of packet captures and different threat models for when you're traveling, but I hope that's helpful. Now, what I want to talk about is coming back to the build of the workflow. The idea was that we would use the n8n credential manager to store these credentials so that every single node would not need to be accessed, or not every single node would not need to be updated as I built this out. Because the Hacker Target API has about 10 different modules. This was the plan. It didn't work like that. You can see here, I was starting to do some debugging where it wasn't playing nice. It wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. And it tried to give me an alternative. And in the end, this is when I went back to the Hacker Target documentation and found really the best way to do it is to use the header. So this is what I've been working on for the past few days. This is now the updated workflow. So the way that n8n, the way that Claude created this initially was a little bit different. It was not the same. And it was just in one straight line, and that wasn't as easy to manage. It wasn't easy to process, to debug. And it's a thing that you'll notice with Claude. It will either do this octopus thing where you have a couple of nodes and then all these legs coming off the sides, or it would just be a straight line. And in practicality, it doesn't really work. What I do is just from a workflow ease of use idea. Every time I was updating the API key, I was adding a sticky note and then doing it like this. Each time I would update the API, I would add the sticky to say that it's been done. And the way that I've done it, just to show you, we're using the header X API key, and then I put my API key in here. And the way that we are addressing the Hacker Target API is using their syntax that they provide in their reference documentation. And that's how you ask the question. So it's https:// api.hackertarget.com, who is, q equals, and then we have the variable. You might be saying, what's this on form submission? What is that doing? That is my trigger. So the trigger that you can have could be a webhook, and you would use that if you're using something like it's on your website and you have maybe a chatbot that's tied in, and that's something a little bit more advanced, and I might look at doing that in the future. But as an MVP, what I wanted to get this doing is very simple, and I can do that with creating a web form with n8n, and it looks like this. So when I put in what is the domain, and I put in dferinsights.com as an example, that's my blog, that's my forensic blog, what that goes and does is it then goes and performs this DNS lookup. This one doesn't have the correct header set up, so I'll just go back to who is. But then we're using, and it's not green anymore because I unpinned it to then submit again. So it plonks that in, and I've just dragged that in from the left, and then it parses that into the query. What I've had to do for every single node is I've used X API key, and then I've put my API key in. This is a working workflow. I've just deleted my API key so that I don't have to figure out how to blur it out in Descript. And then what we're doing from there is I'm using a combination of split out and code, and with any luck, we have the data, or we don't. Okay. That is a bit of a shame. Okay, we'll just use this one. That's very lucky. What I've got here is an example of, I've filled out the web form. It has used the HackerTarget API successfully. It has returned these details. These are the DNS records for the website, dferinsights.com, showing the name servers, text records, all the good stuff that we want to use for OSINT. Hey, did I pronounce it correctly? And then it goes into a code module. And this is what was really cool. What the challenge that I had was the data that comes out from the initial run is good, but it looks a bit messy. And it's, as you've got here, the /n for new line. It wasn't able to be processed the way that I wanted it to process. And I wanted individual items in an array. So I wanted it to present like this. And I've done that by using the code node. This was where ChatGPT was super helpful, because I issued instructions. I have this data, give me JavaScript syntax to present it the way that I want in a list, and it went away and did it. The reason why this isn't finished yet is because each of these modules presents the data in a little bit of a different way. What is happening here is each time I need to go into ChatGPT, we need to develop a new code node, which contains different formatting, and it extracts the data using regex in a different way. And then what it does is it goes into Airtable, and this is really cool. It completes each of the objects in the array as a separate column. So what started out to be something really simple has become absolutely massive. It's a work in progress, but that will be part 2 of this whole project, and that's coming soon. So I hope that's a little bit helpful for you. I hope that gets you a little bit excited about the possibilities of what we can do using an API, and then the capabilities of n8n and Airtable. And I wanted to give you a little bit of a preview of what is coming with this OSINT tool that I'm building. We will take it from there in part 2. I'll see you soon.